Hello everyone and welcome to another very enjoyable game from round 3 of this year's Norway Chess. It's Ari Antari versus Yanni Pomnishi, and this is the Armageddon game. Their classical game ended in a draw, and this one it's really enjoyable, so let's dive straight into it. So Tari with the white pieces opens with e4. We have c5, Nepo goes for the Sicilian defense, we have knight to c3, d6 and now f4, the close Sicilian it is. But Tari goes for this aggressive line with f4 as he needs a win. This is the Armageddon. We have g6 by Nepo, knight to f3, and now bishop to g7. And now bishop to b5 check. Nepo blocks with the bishop to d7, and now bishop back to c4. So kind of losing a tempo, but as the end result, Black was forced to develop his bishop on this somewhat unfavorable square. Knight to c6, just continuing development, and d3 now, getting ready to develop the dark square bishop, also strengthening the center here. We have knight to a5, challenging this bishop, and bishop to d2 now. So here, Black can capture this bishop at any point and keep the bishop pair, but for the moment, Nepo keeps them on the board. We have e6, queen to e2, saying, okay, I might castle kingside, but I might also castle queenside. It's more likely that kingside castles will be played. We have knight to e7, Nepo also ready to castle, and now there are a few games where a3 was played, and it kind of makes sense. You're asking Black, do you really want to capture here, or I'm gonna retreat my bishop to a2? But in this game, we have e5, and it is now, as of move 10, that we have a completely new game. So here you're challenging Black's d6 pawn. You're also threatening, well, if the Black captures with the d pawn on e5, then the c5 pawn will become a little bit weak, and of course Black is not interested in ruining his center. But by playing e5, he also freed the f5 square for Black's knight, so this is exactly what Nepo goes for, knight to f5. We have bishop back to b5 now, offering a trade of light square bishops, and now d5. So closing the center and keeping his knight on this excellent f5 square. And although it seems like you could kick it away with the g4, knight to d4 is perfectly fine for Black. Even though your pawns will get doubled, well, there's not all that much White can do about this. For example, if we trade bishops here, captures, and now move the knight, yes, we're attacking the knight here, but then the knight moves, and Black is perfectly fine here. Not a lot to worry about here. So instead, after d5, we have bishop captures on d7 right away, queen captures, and now knight captures on d5. Temporary pawn win for White, but it will not last. We have e captures on d5. Now we pick up the knight on a5 and the queen to b5 now, attacking the bishop and the b2 pawn. So bishop back to c3, defending the pawn, and now d4, chasing the bishop further back so we can pick up the b2 pawn. So bishop d2 and queen captures on b2. Nepo wins the pawn back, and he's also threatening to capture the c2 pawn, but also the rook on a1. So here we have castles. Now the rooks are defending each other, and now while you could capture on c2, it's safer to maybe just castle first. So castles by Black, and now what do you do about the c2 pawn? Well, it's not all that easy to defend it. You could play something like rook f, not that, but you could play something like rook f to c1. This defends the pawn, but then again, your rooks aren't really all that useful here on a1 and c1. So instead, we have queen to e4, centralizing the queen, also putting some pressure on the b7 pawn. And here, Nepo really has to decide whether to capture the pawn or not. If queen captures on c2, there's nothing wrong with capturing this pawn. If White captures on b7, you're going to capture on d3 as well. So here White would probably go for something like rook f2, but even with this, there are no good discoveries with this bishop, and should be perfectly fine for Black. But it's Armageddon. Nepo doesn't want to waste too much time. He just plays the solid b6 and now asks White, what do you have? I have this beautiful pawn chain here. How are you gonna, well, do anything about this? So here we have g4. Now g4 is playable. Knight to e3, and now bishop captures on e3. We have d captures, and now you can't go for this pawn grab. If you capture this, you're gonna lose the c2 pawn, and now there's really no way for White to push for anything here. Black's position is extremely solid. You can't advance this pawn. The rook is on a1. You can't really do all that much. If you try something like f5, just rook e8, and Black is perfectly fine. So instead, we have rook 8 to e1, saying that, all right, I'm going to put my rooks on the e and f file, and now I'm going to start pushing with f5 and maybe e6. Now the rook is no longer on a1, so you don't have to worry about black's dark square bishop. So here we have queen captures on c2. Nepo finally grabs this pawn, and now we have f5. So starting the attack, Nepo is now up in material, but Tari has the attack, and now Nepo plays rook f to e8, and this is pretty much the oldest question in chess: which rook belongs on what file? Do you play rook to d8? Do you play rook to e8? Do you play this rook to e8? And maybe bringing this rook would be the safer choice. You kind of want to counter white's rooks on the e and f file, and also maybe moving that rook from a8 is definitely a good idea. But we have rook f to e8, and now we have e6 right away. So now it's playable. There's no rook on a1. We have queen captures on a2. Nepo says, all right, you have your fun on the king's side, but when all of that settles, I'm just going to start pushing my a pawn and win the game. There's not much you can do about this. And the position is close to winning for white, but it requires precision. And here, a move that would achieve this for white is knight to g5. This is important because we're not only attacking the f7 pawn now twice, but we've also freed up the f file for the rook, so that will definitely come in handy. And now you don't really have a good move. If you try f6, then knight to f7, and this is just an amazing position for white. You have this beautiful passed e pawn, and black's rooks will not have all that much to do. And if you try capturing here, then f6 just wins. There's nothing you can do. Either you lose the bishop or you allow f7 check, and then the rook falls. So this was in the position. However, Tari played rook captures on e3, and now we have f captures on e6. This is now possible as the knight still occupies the f file, so white does not have the f6 move. So we have f captures on g6, and now h6, closing up the position. We have g5 by Tari, continuing the attack, and now queen to d5. Nepo is up in material, and of course he wants to trade queens. We have queen to h4, now with ideas of capturing here, but now queen to f5. So what can you play here? The problem is if you go for g captures on h6, there's queen to g6 check, and now after the king moves, we're gonna capture on h6 as well, attack the queen and the rook here. So you either trade or you have to defend the rook somehow. Let's say queen to e4, and the game continues. And this is still okay for white, but in the game after this queen to f5 move, we have queen to h5. Queen to h5 with the idea of adding more support to this knight, as black is most definitely preparing rook to f8, and you've cleared the h4 square for your rook. So we want to play rook to e4 to h4, and then maybe do some damage here along the h file. So here we have rook to f8, definitely the best course of action. And now rook to e4, preparing rook to h4, but also maybe rook to g4 has to be considered because the king is on the g file. So if the position opens up, could be very good for white. We have rook to f6. Nepo uses some devilish trickery here because the rook cannot be captured. The queen would hang on h5. We have rook to g4, and now comes rook to g6. And here, again, Nepo kind of overestimated the position. Here, if Tari goes knight to e5, which, is not that difficult to spot. If you don't spot the move he played first, then you spot your own move, and then you're like, yeah, this is a good move. You don't look for anything else. If he didn't mess up his position by playing the move that he did play, then he would have found knight to e5, and this is now great. As there's not much that can be done here. The rook is hanging here, and if of course the knight is captured, then we're just gonna capture on g6, and that's it. There's nothing really good for black here. If you deliver check, we can simply move king to h1, and that's it. And on the other hand, after knight to e5, if you play bishop captures on e5, which again is possible, then of course you simply lose the queen. So the knight to e5 would have been deadly, but he played knight to h4, kind of the same idea, attacks the queen with the rook and the knight, also forks the queen and the rook, but there's a problem. There's a move that completely shatters white's position, so feel free to pause the video and try to find this move for Nepo while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting. Well, you could try bishop to d4 check first. It doesn't ruin the position or anything, but there's no reason to do this. So whoever found this, congratulations, it's a beautiful temporary queen sacrifice, and that is queen captures on g4. This is what Nepo played, and it was in this position on move 31 that Ariantari resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Your queen is hanging, you're down a rook, and if you recapture the queen, then just rook captures on g5. And like we said, Nepo is up too much material for white to go into an endgame, so after we see a trade here like captures, the knight is attacked, let's say knight f3, and now g4, there's really nothing for white to hope for here, as black is up 3 pawns. And like we said in the middle of the game, black pretty much all black pretty much has to do is just push a5 a4, and that's a victory. So of course Tari knows this, and he had like a minute on the clock. Nepo had some 2 minutes on the clock, so it was of course in this position that he resigned the game. Or let me just check. Yeah, he resigned the game. Sometimes even though black is winning because a draw is enough in Armageddon, sometimes players will draw the game, but I just wanted to make sure. No, he resigned here. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We still don't have the real standings, as the round 1 game between Nepo and Karyakin did not happen. It will be played on a rest day, and only then will we see the real standings. But for now, Richard Rapport is leading the tournament, followed by Magnus Carlsen. But depending on how the game plays out between Nepo and Sergey, it could all change, because if Nepo wins, he gets 3 full points for a classical, then Nepo will be leading the tournament. And if Karyakin wins, then he will possibly equalize with Rapport for first place. But we'll see. It's hard to predict any result in a classical match, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, once again, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Tari had 2 good chances in this game to turn it around, but in Armageddon, it almost never happens. You've seen how slippery Magnus can be in Armageddon, as he was supposed to lose so many times, but he always somehow wiggles out. As we always say, luck favors the strong. Once again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jeff Langley, Samuel Kamui, Michael Garbur, John Queenie, and Matthew Coleman for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this very nice tournament, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.